Hey, Feel Good Fathers. Thanks for tuning into the show this week. I've got a great guest today. His name is Stephen Valente. He'll correct my pronunciation if that's appropriate. He's a high energy, great gentleman. He lives right around the corner from me. He's got a great story to tell. Stephen, can you introduce us to you in the next for a couple seconds?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, thank you for having me here. You did pronounce it correctly, Stephen Valente,
Yes.
Italian origin. I am the father of four children, three girls and a boy. And by day, I'm a medical device sales executive. By night, I switch time between being a full-time parent of four kids, as well as some volunteerism that I do in helping men navigate divorce in a healthy way.
Why are we talking about navigating divorce in a healthy way? I know the story, but I'd love because we were talking about this off air and we have a previous relationship. But why is that significant?
I think it's significant because, as a father, I was married almost 22 years fully. But, prior to making the decision to actually file for divorce, I really looked at things as, um, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, and the decision to file for divorce, at least for me, was something that I absolutely 100% never thought I would have to do. Right.
Mm.
And then, of course, in research and in doing some things and knowing friends and colleagues that have been through divorce or are going through divorce now, normally it's the woman that files for divorce, right? So my situation was a little unique on that end. But I did have to make that decision after about 21 years of marriage. And as I was learning more about divorce and learning more about what I was stepping into, I realized that, 80 to 90% of the time, the women are the ones that file. So my situation's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think the natural statistics have it about 70% are wife initiated, female initiated for the divorce. Um, I think that there are some other statistics like we don't have to get into them too much, but so you filed. Are there any details that you want to share about that on the air, or can we just
Yeah,
step into the next
I mean,
stage?
that's fine. I mean, it's, as I like to say sometimes, life is messy, right? So I was married for 20 years or so. Um, my spouse at the time ended up having to battle some addictions and alcoholism. And really, the crux of me having to make that decision was over the course of several years prior to trying to work through some of the situations, potentially get marriage counseling and work through some of those. There were some incidents that really started to involve my children. And
Mm.
eventually, as what I believed my responsibility as a father was, is to remove my children and ultimately myself, but remove my children from that toxicity and that abuse that was going on. So I made the decision. It was a very difficult decision. I'm a man of faith,
Hmm.
and having taken those vows and very much believed in staying in a marriage, I'm also the product of divorced parents, right? So, kind of as a father, I always said I would never do that. I would never get divorced. I will always, stick with my spouse, and we will have a long 50-year history of marriage. I ended up having to make that decision. And it was the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life.
And kudos to you. I think, one of the things I know about you is that it was reasoned. It wasn't frivolous. 21 years, like congrats on that, on that number, even though it's ended, but that's still quite a number to hit. I think the average age of marriage is something like 7 years or something like that. So most people don't even make it as long as they lease and buy their car. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so, so that's really congratulations there. Uh, so you went through, and you have a unique name, a unique title for this program that you're talking about. What is that?
So the title of my I'll call it my community, right, or program too, is called Rock Your Divorce. And
Mm,
really, I'm a big music guy. Music has always been a very heavy passion for me. I'm a drummer, so I've got that. I've been in bands before, and would love to get back into playing music at some point when all four of my kids are out of the house and I have the time to do that. But there were a lot of similarities related to being in a band and being married. There's a lot of things that when you go through songwriting, when you think about music in general, there are a lot of commonalities. And one of the things that I found in doing, or at least looking for some resources prior to me filing for divorce, there wasn't a whole lot of resources out there for men and for fathers that didn't just focus on the legal aspect of divorce, right? There's a lot of resources out there for men when it comes to legal, making sure that you have father's rights, which are very important in today's day and age with courts and custody battles. It's very important for fathers to have those as well. But for a man and a father walking through the divorce process, there's so much more related to it than just the legal. So
mm.
I had this calling, I had this feeling that it was really taking my experience, and not to say that I did everything right, of course. In fact, a lot of the learnings that I had is because I did make some mistakes along the way. But ultimately, I had this calling that it was important for me to share my message with other men that are going through the divorce process. And again, really help them get through it in a healthy way.
Love it. I think that's fantastic. And I think, one of the things about the Feel Good Fatherhood community is that we are all about taking care of ourselves and um, not uniquely, but by taking care of ourselves and being as complete as possible, that then extends to our circle of influence, right? That extends from ourselves to our spouse, to our kids, to our communities, et cetera. And so if you're broken, you have stuff that you haven't um, dealt with, and broken was not the correct term. If you have things that you are working through, right, that cause you to not show up in the way that you want to show up in the world, that can create challenges there. So I absolutely love that. You did say something I thought was really interesting. I love this. There was a lot of commonality in marriage to being in a band and writing music. And that's a unique perspective. And I would love to hear more of your thoughts on that. So pretend, like Feel Good Father, we all know what a band is, but we may not know what being in a band is like. And so if you could walk us through sort of that analogy, and I would love to hear more on your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think, it comes down to do you play an instrument?
I never in a band. I
Okay.
played piano, a little bit guitar.
Okay. All right. So, I think there's some commonalities when it comes to marriages and being in a band when you take, let's say, two individuals, they're all kind of going toward the same common goal, right? So if you're in a band, you each play your own instrument, you each have your own values and goals that you bring to this relationship, just like in a band. And you work together for that common goal, especially as parents, right? Mothers and fathers are working together for their children. So, being in a marriage, there's compromise. Hey, I don't like the way that sounds in a band. Hey, we should put this on the album. Hey, our name should be this. Our name, and there's a lot of those commonalities. But when you take a look at and what I even kind of use is even the Beatles broke up, right? So the thought that the best band in the world, arguably of history, you can have a very strong 21 year marriage. Things happen. You weather storms just like bands do. You go through trials and tribulations, but sometimes, good, bad, right, or wrong, even the Beatles break up. And
Mm.
that's when you, as an individual, as a man and as a father, have to be able to continue to navigate life in a healthy way. And who knows, you go solo or maybe you start another band. Who knows?
Yeah, I love the segue into that. I think that's really accurate. Uh, And I love that analogy. Thanks for bringing that in, because I really do believe like part of the Feel Good Fatherhood methodology as well is acknowledging the gifts and strengths and what you're bringing to not only to your marriage if you're married, or to your partner, or whatever your situation is,
Yep.
but you're also extending that into your kids, because your kids are also, maybe they're backup singers, but like they also have a role in the band, and in sort of the music or the tapestry that you create as a family, and that's all very healthy. Part of that piece, just to kind of keep picking at it, is the acknowledgement of the mutual strengths and benefits. Because one of the things that I think one of the challenges I think we're facing today, and I'd love to hear your comment on that, is we're sort of blurring the lines of everything. And so everybody has to be the same. And it's kind of, it's a weird situation to live in. And I'm not interested in getting into like gender dynamics or anything like that, but I think it just that perspective of like, oh, you're a drummer, you're a rhythm guitarist, you're a bassist, you're a lead guitar, right? You're a saxophone, you're all bringing something different. And I think about my favorite band, like the Foo Fighters. I've listened to them since I was the longest time. And when Pat Smear was in the band, there was I can only describe it like a bounce to his, like he was bringing that ska, that punk bouncy sound to the band.
Yep.
And there was a time period for years where he wasn't involved, and they had a much harder traditional rock sound. And then he's come back recently, and that bounces back,
Yep.
right? Because he's brought that sound. And I think using that analogy, right, that's the acknowledgement of the strengths and weaknesses of each person. That's my take. I'd love to hear your perspective.
No, I agree. And if you look at let's stay on the music time, whether it's Foo Fighters or you look at some of the other bands in history that have had members of the band, sometimes founding members or influential members, come in and out of the band at times, because we all know sometimes they're like revolving doors, right? You see and hear a lot of influences from that individual or from previous bands that they were a part of, right? So no, I agree with you totally, and I think as a father and as a mother, especially raising your children, which ultimately is the main goal. Each of you bring a very unique and distinct value to that relationship with your children, and of course, for those of us that love being parents, that's a way for us to give to our children so that they can go out and live the life that we've given them, right?
Yeah, it's it's the 1 + 1 equals 5 analogy, right?
Yeah.
It's the combination of everything that you have, all your experience in family, everything that your partner spouse has, and all their experience in family coming together to create something brand new, to create a new person. And kind of also, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I got was my father-in-law said, "Hey, now that you're married, you're creating the new family. Like this is you get that opportunity here, to do that," which was fun.
I used to joke that my ex-wife and I, we were in the band and we were producing albums, right? So our kids are our albums, and depending on what we've produced, they're all great albums, but some are more likable than others, so to speak. So,
Oh, I love it.
yeah,
I love it. I could absolutely see that.
yeah,
I have my oldest 11, my youngest is 1 now, and it's like just even now just seeing. And I actually had another guest, David Safir, on. This was a couple weeks ago for those watching this, a couple episodes ago. I always thought that there would be some sort of commonality, so there would be some sort of consistent element, like I can see the mannerisms. Like we actually caught my youngest was actually pantomiming what I was doing. So I was having a conversation, and you can see if you're watching on YouTube or some other channel that I talk with my hands a lot. And so she started to talk with her hands. It was distinct because typically as a 1-year-old, she talks with her hands down.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like noticing that, oh, she's adopting my mannerisms was kind of, whatever. That'll be part of her album, using your analogy,
Yeah,
right?
Well, and like you say, they're the best of our best and the worst of our worst, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I love it. So going back to it, because this has been a great conversation, going back to this rock your divorce idea,
Mhm.
uh, there are some ideas. I'd love to hear about the genesis of the program and kind of walk us through what does it mean to be within like a rocking your divorce gentleman.
Yeah, I think the as I said before, the start of this really, as I was struggling with the idea of what is it going to look like for me at first to initiate this.
Hmm.
I went online, went to YouTube, went to Spotify, go into Barnes and Nobles and look at books, right? I was trying to find as much information as I could to help me understand what process I was about to enter into, right? I had been through it as a child, right? So I had that
Hmm.
perspective of that. Um, but I didn't want this divorce to begin with, right? So with circumstances the way they were, having been in counseling and through counseling and actually still in counseling related to it, I really had to understand, okay, what do I have to be ready for outside of, like I said, just the legal perspective of it? And the statistics that you gave about women filing 70% of the time or what, or higher or lower, there were a lot of resources out there for women, for mothers, right, navigating that. And certain circumstances, definitely. I mean, when you take a look at abuse, you look at alcoholism or addiction, you have aggression, a lot of things, infidelity, all of those, they're women helping women navigate those, but not a whole lot for men,
Yes.
especially when it comes to, um, mental health, emotional health. There's not a whole lot that preps you for the physical or even the financial impacts of what it really means when you make this decision, whether it's the decision that I made to file or if someone files
Right.
their husband, right? It's all the same. The who files in the court is really irrelevant. I mean, it is, right? Um, so, with that being said, what I ended up doing is really taking a step back and looking at, okay, what do I need? What aspects of my life do I need to focus on and ensure that I am consistent and I'm disciplined and I take care of myself so that not only could I get through this, but I can be the best father that I can be for my four children when this is all said and done.
I love it. And that sounds so similar to really the genesis of the feel good fatherhood world. Was I think that my personal experience wasn't I think unique or distinct enough um, to allow it to continue. And that was the idea that I was in a new state across the country from all my support. I was without support, out doing my thing, raising my first child, like basically on an island. New job, like everything, all the things that could have happened,
Yep.
literally happened, and then we moved across the country. And so, like those first couple of years were just me and my wife hanging out doing a thing, and it was a very different time in the course of ecosystem. So like YouTube wasn't what it was today. Facebook groups weren't a thing yet. If you want to get like your timing down for when this was occurring, so it was very difficult to find support, especially as a man in that team, as a father, just to go do it. And I apologize if there were resources out there, but I love the idea that we both saw an opportunity in the world because we were actively looking for support and actively looking for something to help us. And then we just said, well, if no one else, then I will create it.
Absolutely,
It's so well done.
absolutely. And for me, it was more about too, how do I take something a negative, right? I'm not an advocate for divorce by any means, although
Right.
there are situations where, like I felt like in mine, there was no other choice, right? But how do you take something that is as painful and as difficult to navigate as that for a father, for a man? And how do you put a positive to it? How do you utilize that to help others so that if they're in that same situation, maybe you lessen the time or maybe you help them. In my case, I want to help them navigate it in a healthy way, because there are a ton of unhealthy ways that men, can navigate divorce and the divorce process. So yeah, I'm right there with you.
What are some of the what are these steps? Let's walk through the steps and we can jump into each.
Yeah, I think overall, and as I kind of said before, you have, I kind of likened it back to music, right? I looked at the seven notes on the music scale, and for me, they were spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, financial, professional, and legal, right? So when you look at a man, when you look at a father, it's really a spectrum of all the areas, the key areas of our lives that we really should be focused on each and every day, being the best husband, father, and friend we can be in each of those, right? And of course, there's lots of things we can do underneath each and every one of them, but that's normally kind of how I describe it to men.
So let's jump into because I love this idea, and as you were mentioning it, I was reflecting on, yeah, these are probably just principles to just being a good dude, principles to being a good father, being a good husband. And so and the great thing about principles like that is that principles allow you to navigate not only good times well, but navigate hard times, difficult times well as well.
Yep.
Well as well. Wow.
Yep.
Well as well. Let's put that on a t-shirt.
Marketing.
So Stephen, what you said, we started with spiritual. So what's important to know about spiritual?
I think for me, I'm a man of faith. So the idea of everything being rooted in your faith and spiritually, you choose. The I'm not advocating a certain religion, right? But I personally have the faith, and I believe that belief in a higher power, something well beyond yourself, is something that all men should consider and walk through. So for me, understanding that I am grounded by my faith, and that everything first starts and stops there, gave me a really good anchor, to know that there's hope and there's faith and there's a belief that you go out, you do the right thing each and every day, you be the man that God has intended you to be, and you work on these other things. You're going to be the best you can be, most importantly for your children and then beyond. So spiritually, I think for mentally, moving on to the next one, mentally really deals with your mental health. There's a lot of mindfulness practices. There's a lot of, I was a big journaler, right? So between, it kind of like went through. In fact, my journals are right there behind me. I don't know if you can see
Sure.
all nine of them, right? So during that divorce process, I really journaled a lot. But mindfulness practices, meditation, there are things that you can do when it comes to ensuring that you are clear of mind, and because going through that divorce process can be very difficult, right?
I find that a lot of I think one of the challenges that I would see going back to acceptable emotions for men and kind of engaging with that discussion is that having a practice to manage your emotions uh, internally before they are externally communicated, I think is one of the key signs of just quite frankly of maturity.
Yep.
And that one, I think that particular principle is applicable across the board, but especially for men. One of the core things that Hollywood has deemed that this is not attractive anymore, but believe me, men, if you're listening and you're young, that this is an attractive trait, is that stoicism, is that stoic ability to drive through whatever the storm is in and carrying on your back the people that are around you. I just recently had a conversation with some of my many mom friends and stuff like that. And it was literally about the reason why you get the tests, why she is challenging your character, challenging your integrity, challenging these things is because if you're, like I always love this one. If you're in the zombie invasion, you're the one that's carrying the weapons and she's probably going to carry your kids. Like, that's just how it's going. So what she is asking you is to say, are you the person that's going to protect the family? Are you the person that's going to stand up? Are you the person that's going to do this? If you get a flat tire on the side of the road, are you the person that's going to walk up to that strange driver who's pulled over and keeping the car and everybody else safe? Like, that's the predisposition there. It's, are you going to step up and do that? And a big piece of that is having check on your emotions. And through mindfulness. That's the trigger there, the mindfulness of your mental state.
Absolutely. And they do run, and that's why I put, spirituality first. Mental and emotional are right there next to each other. And I do believe you're absolutely right. I think your mindset really has, kind of, if you can control your mind, you can control your emotions. Through the divorce process, and I can go deeper into this at some other point, but through that divorce process, you do feel a lot of different feelings, and you have anxiety, your mind races, you play out all of these scenarios because your life and the life of your children and your future are all at stake, right? So there's a heavy pressure, and if you don't manage through mindfulness, through meditation, have that stoicism where you are controlled, you make clear and concise judgments and decisions, not based on emotion, you're going to be in a world of hurt, especially in the courtroom.
Love it. That's everything you just said to me is like thinking long term. Absolutely love it. So that's 3. So what's number 4?
So we have our spiritual, our mental, emotional. Physical is something that as a man, your physical ability to get through things. So whether you choose yoga, whether you choose weightlifting, whether you're a runner, or if you just look at yourself today and say, what, I'm leading more of a sedentary lifestyle, I really need to become more physically fit. And it was a journey that I was on prior to for a little bit, but it really kicked into gear for a number of reasons, and one of those is stress, right? So if you take care of your physical body, the stress and anxiety of what you go through daily while you're in that divorce process, and even after, there's a lot of responsibilities, of course, that both mothers and fathers have, but a lot of times the financial pressures that normally fall on fathers can cause physical ailments, right? So high blood pressure, poor diet for stress, adds on weight, heart disease, everything else. So if you want to be around long term for those kiddos, you better take care of yourself.
I heard a fantastic concept. It's probably very true about stress and cortisol. Cortisol being the hormone that is sort of the stress hormone. It does have good uses, right? It can trigger adrenaline. It can trigger responses. It can definitely trigger alertness. And so that is something that is a positive use for that. But stress is felt by people around you. And so like it comes out, so the cortisol and the stress comes out in your sweat glands. And then you have this aura around you that people within proximity can actually feel. So if you're, these terms are imperfect, but if you're like the alpha in the room, and in that space, you have people around you that are following your lead, and this can be the boss or whatever. Mm-hmm. That stress is going to be felt by everybody else around you. And some of us think of that as like an intuitive or emotional, empathetic, compassionate sense, but like this concept of it coming through in your pores is a physiological response. Yeah. So the person next to you is stressed. You're getting stressed if they're sort of your leader. So I can only imagine what that would be like. It is high stakes. It is high stress. What that would be like for your kids, especially if they're young, going through that kind of thing. So why did I bring that up? Because when you sweat, you get rid of that. And so one of the when you stress your body through physical activity or sauna or hot tub, whatever, cold plunging, that kind of stuff, your body will get rid of the sweat. Is one of the primary ways your body gets rid of toxins. And so when you do have that buildup of cortisol, it's to your best interest to go work out, and then go work out, go sit in a hot tub, go and sit in a sauna, get it out of your body. But the other side that I love is that, I'm curious on your take on this, is that a lot of the proceedings as we're describing are outside of your control. It's you're kind of participating, but you're not really in control of it as much. Um, I would imagine that the taking on of a physical exercise routine like that is something that is far more within your control.
Oh, absolutely. And I found myself doing that. The times that I felt stressed, times that I felt, and you're absolutely right. Control, especially, for individuals that, like to plan, I'm a planner. I like to see ahead of things. Or in essence, you want to make sure that you know that everything is going along as it should. You are sometimes out of complete control when it comes to court systems, rulings. I had to wait an entire month between my 3-day trial and the actual date that the judge came to tell us what was happening to the family, the final ruling. There was 30 days, right? So you can imagine not knowing what was going to happen to me or my 4 children, right? So I did a lot of gym time, because it's good for you anyway. But yeah, helping relieve stress and anxiety and get yourself back on track.
One of the, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but I feel like there's a really good lesson here. The book Make Your Bed. Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
So
But
it's
is that Jordan Peterson?
no, it's he
He's
does
clean.
say that it's one of his principles.
Yeah, I think it's
I
Cleaning
believe,
the Room is his book or something like that. But anyway, go ahead.
yeah, but it's by Admiral, I think McLaren. I think is I always get his name wrong. I'm looking at my books for those of you that are listening in the library of the podcast studio. I don't think I have it here. But one of the things he said was that when you're in the military, one of the reasons why they had that strict routine of making your bed, making it perfect, is that there's a level of aesthetics and control. And the idea is that no matter what, and I'll use the language he uses, like no matter what shit you get into,
Yep.
day in, day out. And remember, these soldiers they're in a life and death game, right? So no matter what they're into, at the end of the day, they come back to the nice made, clean bed, the clean barracks, the clean this, right? So there's a sense of that normalcy. There's a
Hmm.
sense of no matter what, I'm preparing for that future state, which is pretty much the summation of everything we talked about with working out.
Yeah, and I even in the process of Rock Your Divorce, there's a lot of things related to routines, right? So you talk
Mm,
about having routines or having that structure. Structure is really good for everyone anyway. Children, actually, I think the research that I saw, they crave structure and they actually do better in structured environments up to certain ages, right? I liken the routines that men do every day to a band's set list, right? So when
yes.
you take a look at why bands put set lists together, why do they have the songs in a certain order? They play the same songs over and over and over again in the same routine, right? That's how they're practicing so that when they go on tour, everything's around that set list. Everything is around that routine, right? There's a concept behind it. There's a theory behind it, and there's a reason for all of that. So I'm right there with you. Whether it's making your bed, whether it's going through some of these routines we talk about in these 7 different principles, it's all relative.
Love it. What's number 5?
So we did spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, financial. So
Financial.
it kind of speaks for itself. But finances in divorce, pre, during, and definitely post, can cause a high level of stress and anxiety. It also is life changing, right? It's lifestyle changing and it's life changing. And for those, I fought very hard for almost 15 months and did get full custody of all 4 of my children. So I don't pay child support, nor is child support given to me. But more often than not, the father has to pay child support for those children when they're not even with him. So you're kind of paying it while they're with you, right? But you're also paying it, and that's a stress, that's an anxiety for those that have been in dual income households. To go from a dual to a single can be stressful, right? The cost of a divorce, especially if there's, like in my situation, it was not amicable. There was a lot of high level of interaction between the attorneys. It was a long, drawn out process. So all of those together put a very stress and strain on your financial part of your life, which does affect everything before it, right?
Mhm.
Mentally, emotionally, physically, like you talked about, stress and anxiety. So all of that comes together in the financial.
Love it. Thank you. That's super clear. Number 6.
So it would be legal is the next one, right? Because that is kind of a given. As I said before, when I was researching, it was all about the legal aspect of divorce that looked like resources for men. But there's so much in legal that I found out. There's so much over those 15 months of going through not only the divorce case, but we had a couple incidents where the criminal piece was brought in too. So, having to navigate the divorce process is one thing. The legal aspect of it, when you don't know that much about how the legal process works, can be extremely difficult to navigate it. A very high level of anxiety, a very high level of, the ignorance to it, not knowing causes that stress, causes that anxiety even further.
Got it. Got it. And number 7?
And the last one is professional. And I think for men and for fathers out there, our profession, what we choose to do with what is the old saying? I work half days, right? So there's 24 hours in a day. I work 12 of the 24, so I'm really working half day. What we choose to do from our professions, by and large, defines us as men, right? Well, going through the divorce process, there's a lot of things that can alter your performance at the one thing that has to be stable throughout this whole thing, which is how you're getting paid, how you're providing and protecting your children and your home, how you're paying for the legal process, which can be very expensive, especially if it gets extensive. So you really have to be able to manage doing your job, doing it well, and continuing that employment during this most difficult time.
Well, that's a good 7 step. And I love, and maybe this is my addition, but I love the idea that these are just traits and things that you want to manage as a man, as a feel good father, no matter what. But I also particularly love the idea that these are ways in particular that you navigate through that divorce system, navigate through that situation and get there. And I really do love the information that you're adding there, that this is not something that you're advocating. At Feel Good Father, we don't advocate it either. We're all about, facing your family, facing whatever, your spouse, and facing that. And that is a core tenet of what we believe in. And, I appreciate here that it's not, we're not bashing, right? We're
No,
focused
not
on the
at all.
family, focused on the protection of the family. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. The kids are the most important thing, and I think ultimately too, the 7 principles are applicable to those men, whether they're fathers or not yet, right? Especially if they're fathers, because if you think about it, everything that you do is a reflection to your children, right? So they watch you, just like you had talked about the idea of your 1 year old speaking with their hands, right? And those are learned traits. What I believed and what I have seen in my own experience is that your children watch you through this divorce process. And if you navigate it in a healthy way, if you take the high road when it's very easy to take the low road during the divorce process with your ex, you will be better off, but more importantly than anything, your children will be much better off. And I learned that from having to see what my parents did during their divorce, and now I look at their divorce a very different way than maybe when I did when I was a kid. But at the same time, too, my number one goal was to ensure that my kids were healthy, happy, and safe. And I feel like I was able to do that, through that process.
Love it. My man, Stephen, if folks want to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
You can catch me on LinkedIn, Stephen Valente. You can send an email to info@rockyourdivorce.com or info@rockroommedia.com. Or call me, text me, whatever floats your boat. I'll be as
Awesome.
helpful as possible.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me.